Thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. It's a real pleasure and privilege to be listening to, learning from, and taking part in this really exciting global conversation. So thank you to everybody that's made this event happen. I'd like to share one key message with you today in my talk. And that key message comes with some hope and some realism. Emotion can be measured by using a scientific framework that validates the lived and the felt experiences of the places where we work, live, and play. We can measure what emotion is, the intensity of our emotional relationships with our places, and we can also measure the socio-economic outcomes that are associated with these relationships. Furthermore, as Thomas and the Humanized team have shown us, we can also use this information to inform design decisions, which in turn, if we're able to put emotional intelligence in a way that nourishes our environment, can improve the lives and livelihoods of people in place. But providing this scientific framework should start to reject what has been a dominant and traditional view that emotions are elusive, they're subjective, they're biased, and therefore they can't easily shape placemaking. We've heard the wonderful neuroscience that starts to dispute this and refute this, but what I want to share with you today are our everyday lived and felt experiences and how we express why our emotions are so important to us and how incredibly crucial that is when we're thinking about the future of our design. And perhaps we don't really fully understand why emotions are so powerful because we haven't had that comprehensive multidisciplinary scientific framework that allows us to robustly interrogate how we feel in and about place. And the framework that I'm going to set out in this talk today shows that we can access emotion in ways that ensure emotion is measurable, and therefore, and really crucially, emotion is a valid category of information. And this quote on the slide, I think, also highlights the tension. We've heard a little bit about this today and in the opening ceremony yesterday. This tension that exists within the built environment profession. And I would suggest that this tension often results from the fact that we separate our personal perspectives from our professional lives. And as such, we perhaps neglect our own and our family and friends as lived and felt experiences within the professional processes of delivering urban change. We're often architect, planner, designer, academic first, and citizen second. See if we can bring them together to think about how the personal and the professional can come together to really help us think about better places in the future. So what if, by tuning in to our everyday experiences and validating those felt experiences of ourselves and others around us, we can supercharge the ways in which we can humanize our cities? I'd suggest, and I hope that you might agree with me, that the framework that I'll present here today liberates us from that traditional and dominant way of doing and thinking. And it does so because it asks us very directly to bring the personal and embodied experiences of our places into closer dialogue with the professional decisions that we're privileged to be able to make. So my talk will outline a new scientific process that shows how we can do this, and therefore how we can start to measure emotion and incorporate it within design decision making. So the talk outlines my process, which is built from a new conceptual framework which uses innovative methodological approaches and adopts a deep analysis of the ways in which emotion is and can be applied in practice. This process has been a very long journey. It's almost 2 decades worth of research, which I now realise makes me feel quite old. But it's been subject also to quite stringent and constructive academic review, and it's been published in books, reports, academic articles, but also crucially conveyed through creative outputs like film and animation. And I think we can all experience and enjoy the different kinds of artistic expression that we've seen today and how powerful they are in bringing across some of these emotions that we all feel. But all of this complex academic published work starts from a very simple question. And we're going to follow this simple set of questions throughout the talk. And I'm going to ask you to work a little bit with me. It's very easy to sit and to listen to people talk at you, but actually you're as an important part of this presentation as I am. Because I'm going to ask you to think yourself about the places that matter to you. I'm going to ask you to talk about those places with the person next to you. And crucially, we're going to play with the fans to see if we can start to generate some emotional energy in the room ourselves. And this isn't just a fun exercise. I hope you'll agree it could be fun. But as we think, feel, and talk together today, we're going to start to continue that really vital public conversation that we've heard so much about today, and that is so crucial to our ability to humanise our cities. So the first question that I'm going to ask you today is, which places and buildings matter to you? And here I want you to go into your own hearts and your own minds to think about those places that you really care about. We've heard the word care a lot today. Just take a moment of quiet pause and reflection to just think about those places. The types of places that they might be, the types of places that you might in fact divert your usual route so that you can walk past them, so that you can be a passerby, because this building really matters so much to you that you're going to take 2 minutes out of your day to go and stand by it and walk past it. Just see if you can start to think about some of the different types of places that matter to you. Now, normally in my research process, we'd all share what these places are, what they mean to us, and why we have those feelings. But I'm not going to put you on the spot. I feel that would be difficult in a room as large as this, but also perhaps not fair. So instead, what I'm going to do is share with you one of my favourite places, one of my special places. And to do this, I'm going to bring a little bit of Scotland to Seoul, and you wouldn't believe how long it took me to get blue sky in a picture of Glasgow. It rains a lot, but it's a beautiful city. This is Buchanan Street. It's the main shopping street in Glasgow, and I hope you'll agree that it is beautiful and it's not boring. But the street for me is not just a collection of beautiful buildings and beautiful facades, but a place where each of my senses come alive, and I can feel joy and pride and excitement, but also sometimes anger and sadness, and maybe even sometimes a little bit of anxiety as well. And I can feel this way because this street shapes the rhythms of my life. I shop there. I meet friends in the many cafes and bars and restaurants. I create memories with my family there. But crucially, and I think aligned with the principles of the Humanise campaign, I'm going to admit this on stage now and recorded for perpetuity, I've probably only been inside about 15 to 20% of these buildings. Because it's the outside that attracts me, it's the feel of this street that makes me want to walk down. And so most often I go there without purpose. I go there just to be, to exist, and to be in time and place. And the French, I think, have a beautiful word that really encapsulates what this process is. It's called to be a flaneur. A person who strolls, observes, feels and thinks in urban space, almost without agenda. But ironically, some of my best academic ideas have happened on this street when I haven't been thinking. It stimulates something creative in my brain that I'm sure the clever neuroscientists will tell me how and why. So it's also a really productive place for me individually. And from all of these experiences, this tells me that Glasgow is a special place for me. And so any attempt to change this street, to demolish a building, to change the facade, and it has happened in the past, unlocks in me a frustration, a sadness, a disappointment, and crucially a desire to protect not just the physical landscape, but also the emotional landscape of this street. So it matters to me, but I also know it matters to a whole host of Glaswegians and people who visit this street. And I know this because on this street, you'll find people singing and dancing and playing the bagpipes. They're shopping, they're congregating, they're rushing for the train and the bus. The stations sit at either end of the street. Or they just linger and soak up the surroundings. And they do so because the streetscape is generous. It invites you in, it allows you to pause, it enables you to play, and as such, it fizzes with emotional energy. It's a street to savour. So professionally, this has probably everything, hopefully Thomas will agree, that reflects the humanised principles. It has the door distances, it has the visual complexity, and it has buildings that last, hopefully for many, many years to come. And it's also therefore no surprise to me that this street in the west of Scotland, west central of Scotland, also had the highest retail rates outside of London. So emotional value therefore stimulates economic value. There's a real tight correlation between them. But back in my day job where I teach and research over design, development and placemaking, I realised I didn't have a vocabulary. I hadn't been trained to be able to process what I was feeling. In fact, I realised that across all of my degrees, all three of them, I'd never really remembered seeing the word emotion in any of those textbooks. And so as a professional, I didn't know how to process it. But as a person, I knew that this was really important to me. I may not have been able to read about emotion in books, but I could sure see it on the streetscapes wherever I travelled in the world. And so those places that I hope you're holding in your hearts and your minds, the places that matter to you, may reflect an intensely personal experience, but it's also probably an experience that you're sharing with people sat next to you here today in the room, or with people in Sydney or Shanghai, and also those people out singing and dancing on Buchanan Street in Glasgow. So please hold your places in your mind and in your heart as we go through those talk, as I go through my talk, because my talk couldn't exist without your feelings about your places. This world doesn't exist without emotion. However, we do need to be able to make sense of all of these feelings, all of us, to understand why we feel these ways and what kinds of places are special to us. Without this, we cannot hope to move a public conversation into a prerogative to design better and to develop policies that enable us to be able to do that. So, we can measure emotion. And we can measure emotion by breaking it down into component parts. We can work out what it is by understanding what it is as a concept. We can also start to use different kinds of methods and techniques that enable us to express why our places matter. And we can then apply that in practice. And together, this all helps us to understand how we can measure emotion. So the science helps us. We can build, and indeed I have, built a conceptual framework. And this conceptual framework started by asking, what is emotion? Okay, it's a big word. And I suggest that this broad category of emotion is comprised of three connected areas. We've heard a lot about responses today. They're a crucial component of this, but they're just one. Emotional attachments, and also emotional communities. And this gives me that vocabulary that I was searching for. And within this framework, I'd suggest that responses are often the most visible and the most obvious. We can put hearts on walls, and we can say, I love New York, I love Shanghai, I love Seoul, I deeply love Glasgow. We can say this. So let's go back to your places, and this is where we're going to start using the fans. Let's play a little game together. Raise your fan if you can think of a place that makes you feel happy. Well, that is a very pleasing sight. So something's working. Okay? So happiness is in the room. Raise your fan if you can think of a place that makes you feel sad. That looks to be about the same to me. And here's the crucial one. Can you think of a place that makes you feel angry? So take all of those emotions and put them together and fuel them within this public conversation that we're starting, to try and see if we can take that anger and use it in a productive way to make us feel happy in the places that we want to be, in the places that we care about. But these are just three emotions: happiness, sadness, and anger. And all of the very clever neuroscientists will tell you that there's at least 27 emotions, and every time I read a new paper, there's another one or another two that they find. There are lots and lots of different emotions and different emotion words. And on the screen, you can see just some of the very many emotion words that people directly told me when I asked them a similar question. How does your building, how the place you care about make you feel? They said sad, they said angry, they said happy. Going back to an earlier talk, they also talked about awe and pride and enjoyment and wow. And so we have from this a really rich emotional register of why our places matter to us. And we can express this verbally. So, in thinking about what these emotional responses are, we can start to measure the frequency, the recurrence, and the type of emotional responses. And we can then start to compare them across different people and places. We could then go one step further and start to test design options, to change the texture, the colour, or the style of a facade, and see if that changes the complexity and the interactions of these responses on the slide. But I'd suggest that responses not just are visible or obvious, but they can also change, and we need to be attuned to how they change over time. If I asked you in a week or a month or a year or 5 years' time, those places that made you happy might now make you feel sad. On Buchanan Street, I can feel happy and sad in the same day, depending whether it's sunny or it's raining. And so, I guess what I'm saying here is that responses can only be part of the conversation. And in fact, what stays the same is our attachment to that place. Buchanan Street makes me cross, makes me sad, makes me happy, but what never changes is the fact that it's my special place and I love it. And I hope and I invite you all to come to Glasgow and experience it with me, and hopefully by yourself as well. We'll try and get some blue sky for those days. And the fact that this place matters to me has a scientific name. It's called place attachment. Essentially all that means is that it's the emotional bonds that go beyond a response, that are deeper than that. In fact, we know, the evidence suggests, that an attachment is an existential need. It's an essential part of what it means to be human. And I'd suggest also that this is the most crucial aspect of emotion, because evidence also suggests it affects our sense of self, our health, our ability to belong, and there's also evidence to suggest it influences GDP, economic growth, and productivity. In lots of ways, it truly is an emotional and economic superhero, but only if we understand it and only if we mobilize it properly. But because it sits, emotion and attachment, so deep in the human condition, it is harder to measure than that visible response that we just all expressed in the room now. But it is possible. We can create place attachment indexes that measure the intensity of our attachments, and we can also measure the reasons that contribute to this. So think for a moment about why you chose those places a few minutes ago, about why they make you happy or sad or angry, about why you care about them, about why they matter so much to you. And see if any of your reasons agree with the reasons that I found in my research. I'm going to show you, if the technology works, just a very short animation that helps to explain how and why we form emotional attachments.
We all have historic places that we love. It's usually somewhere that feels just right, a place we enjoy visiting, looking at, or going into. Or perhaps it's a place we miss now that it's gone. We feel like this because we develop emotional attachments to places. But what exactly causes an attachment? Is it the physical fabric of a building or place? Is it memories, stories, history, current uses, future potential? The answer is that it's all of these things and more, and that they combine in a variety of ways to produce the unique personalities of historic places. This is why they are special to people. Understanding these personalities can help us acknowledge and nurture emotional attachments as historic places change. So, here's a question. How might such an understanding help with managing change in the historic urban environment?
And I should say here that, again, as Cleo said, research is collective and collaborative, so I thank all of my project partners and the Arts and Humanities Research Council who funded a lot of this research. And hopefully you'll have seen that the facades are important to us in our decisions about what matters to us. And they matter not just because of the way they look or they feel, but also because they narrate the stories and the rhythms of our lives. Every time we pass by a facade, it gives us a different memory, a different meaning, and a different story. And so all of this together moves us into happiness or sadness or anger, but it moves us into this deep emotional bond. It means that we want to go there, we want to revisit, we want to replay. And so the third and final aspect of the framework moves us beyond our individual responses and attachments, because we need to design for every one of us, but we also need to design for us collectively. And it's the collective good that I want to move on to in the third part of the framework. So here, I'm going to ask you to just talk to the person next to you, to just start that public conversation that Thomas and the team have been encouraging us to do. And I want you to turn to the person next to you, or behind you, or in front of you. You make the decision. And I want you to share with that person one reason why you care about that place that hopefully you're still holding in your heart and in your mind. I'm just going to leave you a minute or so just to talk to one another. So this is a bit where you don't have to listen to me, you can talk to each other. Stop the clock on me talking. Over to you. You're part of the presentation now. Okay, I'm sure you could carry on talking, but I'm going to cut you short here. I'm going to cut you short because I want to leave you wanting more. I want to leave you wanting to talk to the person next to you, the person behind you, the person in front of you, over coffee, in the square, with your families, with your friends. I love that you're still talking. I have no authority. But I love it. Because this is the most important aspect of the talk today. That you all talk to one another and think about how enjoyable it is to talk to each other about the places that matter to you. Let's keep doing that, because think about how it makes us feel. Okay? So hold that. And I couldn't hear, because I'm all the way up here, but I bet you any money that those reasons that you each shared with each other can be repeated across the room. Because wherever I go in the world to do this kind of exercise, similar patterns, similar ideas come forward, similar reasons. We have a lot in common about the way that we think about our buildings. We also have some differences, and they're crucial to be able to hold in the design process too. We won't all agree, but we can deal with that when we're thinking about how we validate different opinions. So my research showed that you're all part of lots of different emotional communities. When I take it back to my special place, Buchanan Street in Glasgow, I'm probably a member of maybe 3 of these different emotional communities. One of place, it's where I live and I work. One of profession, I work in the built environment. But also, and here's my nerd fact, I'm a historian and I love historic buildings. So I'm probably also a part of an emotional community of interest. And often when we think about community in the English language, we define it as being of geography or of interest. And in doing so, we strip away the very foundation and fabric of what it means to be in place together. And that is to share the kinds of emotional responses and attachments that hopefully you've all generated in the room and spoken about with each other. So I hope you can see that this framework, this concept, allows us to measure different types of emotion, communities, attachments, and responses. And it takes this big, complex category of emotion and breaks it down into chunks. But how do we get hold of this information? What kinds of techniques? We have the neuroscience, but we also have something that again is foundational to our sense of who we are, and that's the ability to tell stories, which you've all just done. So when I said at the start, your feelings are the foundation stone, they are. And your ability to tell stories about those feelings are crucial to be able to unlocking the potential of emotion within design. And we can tell stories through a range of different formats. Just on the board are some of the methods that I've tried over the years. And the one that stayed with me the most is emojis. And I didn't build this from any textbook again. But again, I started to think about what was happening in my everyday life. I walked through Edinburgh Airport and I saw people pressing buttons, emoji buttons, to say, how was your experience today? And I thought, hang on a minute, people are doing this. I then looked at my WhatsApps and saw the hundreds of emojis that came through every day. I'm sure you're all in the same position. And I also started to see it in the urban environment, in posters and on pavements and on walls. And it showed me that people were comfortable with expressing their feelings through emojis. But I felt quite vulnerable about this. I wondered if academics might laugh at me. Maybe it wasn't scientific enough. But then I thought, no. Because you know what? The best science comes from the people that are living that science. And so we have to, as professionals, not impose a clever technique on somebody, but instead work from the bottom to be able to work with people and how they feel comfortable in expressing what matters to them. But I also knew that I needed more than emojis. I needed to know how they could be used to tell stories and to structure conversations so that I could both count the different types of emotions and responses that were coming through, but also I could understand the reasons why. So here I developed a scale which comes out of a whole range of different emotions research from neuroscience and psychology around the number and intensity of emotions. So by combining everyday experience and scientific knowledge, I was able to create a rigorous method that allows us to measure the range and depth of feeling. And through using emojis to tell stories, I received hundreds of thousands of words that I could analyze to see the patterns, to see the reasons why your places matter to you. And so all we would do in the exercise is start with that simple question. When I see this building, this is Paisley Abbey in Glasgow, I feel, and just click a button, instinctively, no thought, just click a button. And from that, a graph would come up instantaneously and anonymously, and we'd talk about why 90% of people felt happy and 10% of people felt furious. And people were very generous, they wanted to tell their stories. Some people even offered different emojis that weren't on the board, such as pride or frustration. And some people, showing the power of collective conversation, change their initial instinctive emoji response based on listening to other people. And you know what? We also had fun. So science can be fun. I think it's fun anyway, but hopefully everybody else does as well. And so from this we can run statistical analysis, and I can tell you that 90% of people feel happy or very happy in this place. But the stories enabled me to understand why, and the why is crucial in informing design decisions. And so here is another one of my examples. It's a picture house, a cinema in Campbelltown, about a 3-hour drive from Glasgow. And you can see on the board some of the discussion. It's a very short excerpt of a 2-hour workshop. And I can look for responses, so people voluntarily offered pride and love. They all agreed they felt very happy about this place. And so we had a sense of shared emotions. But as we go through, you can start to see that the facade, the way it looks, was really important for people in terms of coming to that emotional conclusion. And it was also really important in the context of how they then used that facade. It wasn't static, it was part of their life. So a simple linguistic and thematic analysis gives us an evidence to show that we can measure the type, nature and intensity of responses and attachments of communities. On a place attachment index, this would probably be 100 out of 100. And I'd suggest that the next stage, and what I'm going to leave you on with this talk today, is how we translate all of this information, a simple emoji and a complex process of linguistic and thematic analysis across hundreds of thousands of words, and take all of that and help us make different decisions across the urban development cycle. How can we, for example, design for attachment? How can we understand the components of joy and build that into a client brief? So now, hopefully, maybe you agree with me, that we can measure emotion. But we need to know when and where this emotion can be most useful to us in the practice of placemaking. And my research has shown that there are key points across the urban development cycle where we can both locate and work productively with emotional responses, attachments, and communities. And on the slide you can see 6 key stages where emotion is already being expressed. Just through that storytelling, we're already able to see it. From working on site and feeling the buildings, the craftspeople who are working with the texture and the materiality, they're expressing their emotional connections to these places all of the time. Through thinking about community engagement, through thinking about who's going to buy these buildings once they've been retrofitted and done up and sold on. We're trying to elicit a positive emotional response and a nascent attachment when we market these places to future people. And we also see it very clearly when we start to debate why our places matter to us. That's where the happiness, the sadness, the anger comes through. So hopefully what you can see from these 6 stages is that we can do differently based on our ability to measure emotion. We don't just have to think about the emotion at the start of the process through a traditional engagement exercise or at the end through post-occupancy surveys. But instead we can infuse emotion throughout the process to ensure that we each, as citizens and professionals, not first and second, but together, can co-create places that will matter to us. That we as citizens and professionals can be partners in delivering change together by recognizing that we have collective expertise in how places make us feel. In this way, I'd suggest we can humanize our cities, not just in the products and the outputs, the new buildings, the places, or the public realm, but also by adopting people-centered approaches infused with, as Thomas said, and I showed on my second slide today, emotional intelligence. Let's put the science and the emotional intelligence and the design together and help us create those places that we will care about. And this isn't just a nice, fun thing to have, but my research also shows there are over 30 evidenced social and economic outcomes that are associated with nurturing emotion throughout that cycle, from well-being, community cohesion, increased inward investment, and higher GDP. Your generous participation in the various exercises during the talk today, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I was very nervous about it, so thank you very much for participating. Show that it is possible when we come together and we talk, and we understand each other's emotions. So I encourage you to continue thinking and feeling and talking about your places, and think about how you could share this with your neighbour, your friend, your family member, a designer, a developer, in ways that ensure that you can continue to nurture your attachments to your places and nourish your soul through doing so. And what hopefully you've also realised today is that you can measure your own emotions yourself. You can decide which places you care about and which make you happy and sad. In essence, you've measured emotion today. Not just me with a scientific framework, you've done it. But hopefully that scientific framework can take us one step on to use that information to guide the decisions that we might make. So I'd like to end with an emotional response. Hope. I hope that each of us in this room today will leave with a belief that we can not only measure our own emotional relationships with our places, but that we can apply this skill to inform our collective conversations and design decisions about our places. In so doing, my hope is that we can design places that bring us more happiness than sadness or anger, to ensure that we can develop those deep existential attachments to our places, and above all, that we can share these feelings with others in ways that support our sense of self, nourish our communities, and develop our economies. It's been a real honour to share some of my research with you today, and I thank you very much for your time and attention and participation in this talk today. If anybody would like to know more, then here are a series of books and reports and practical toolkits that I hope can be of use in ensuring that the scientific evidence base that's based on emotional intelligence and everyday experience and science can help us to collectively together start to really humanise our cities. Thank you.